So as we talked about months ago, and I certainly respect Supervisor Frentzen wanting some of this more detail, but I think we knew then that there's some big holes to fill, and structurally we aren't going to get there overnight. I mean, it's been thrown out that I'll call them draconian, and we've chosen to be surgical. And I would just ask that and remind us as we go through today's final decisions to try to maybe stay on the surgical track, because you can't just, and I think the chart that Laura gave us late yesterday also on the employees and the percentage of the net county cost and where they fall under working for state or federal or the general fund sort of points to that more than what maybe some of us thought. So it's not as simple as it seems, and I'm certainly open to suggestions from anybody on this board as we move through this, but I think there's some options and alternatives to get us to where we need to be, and that'll certainly change by the time we get to September also, as we see already. So, Supervisor Frentzen.
Can I continue?
Yes.
Thank you. So, Laura, you mentioned 90% of the increase is in the salaries and benefits.
Oh,
So,
don't hold me
look,
to that number. I'm
I know.
guesstimating.
And 60% of our overall budget are in salaries and benefits. So when we talk about cuts, we're talking about cutting salaries and benefits or resources in our staff. Also, the consulting contracts that we have, we always need to be aware of that. So looking at the budget overall, looking at all these numbers, we got to cut the salaries by 5 to 7% in order to have a structurally balanced budget.
I
We
would
can't
caution this
do
board
that.
in those.
Do you mind if I continue?
I think
We can't.
legally.
I appreciate it if you let me
You're
continue.
entering into,
You're entering into
You
a
haven't let
problem
me
area.
finish my sentence.
I'm just
We
telling you.
cannot do that because of our contracts. Can I finish my sentence? Thank you. If you want, I can just sit back and let the rest of the board decide today.
I don't think we're asking anybody to take their ball and go home, Supervisor Frentzen. So we're just cautioning you to be careful because it's all a very
Didn't
slippery
make a
slope.
motion. I just made a statement, and I'm finishing the sentence. Because of our contract, we cannot do that. It wasn't a motion. It was not an action.
Supervisor Frentzen, continue.
Thank you. So how else can we accomplish this? We still got to look at our salaries and benefits. I would like us to look at the salaries and benefits for non-contract employees, which is our admin and upper-level management, and see what we can cut in those positions. We also need to look at the new positions that we have created since 2011-12 and analyze every single one of those to figure out whether that position was created to create another service or quality of service, and have a good understanding of why we have done that. We have spent a lot of resources and probably a lot of heartache with our department heads in the past few months to get to this point. And we have a long way to go. The direction was to bring a structurally balanced budget to the board. I don't see that, and when I look at the 5-year plan, I still don't see it. I see bleeding continuing down the road. We keep talking about, yes, it's going to get better, revenues are going to go up, but when I look at the 5-year projection, we haven't even considered putting money aside for our CIP and reserves, unfunded liabilities, and contingencies, and yet we show deficit for 5 years down the road. So whatever we're doing, it's not sustaining long-term. We got to look at this as a big picture. It's great that we went through the exercise yesterday. We need to think outside the box. We got to crunch the numbers. We get criticized because we use our calculators to make decisions. But if you don't, you're just going to waste everybody's time. Thank you.
Supervisor Frentzen, can I ask you one thing? At the beginning, you were talking about, you said something about the non-contract positions, and so are you talking about really that the upper, the kind of the more executive management?
Yes, more executive management.
Great.
And then now I'm going to get scolded at. If we have to cut 5 to 7% from the other salaries, what's that total amount, and what that portion needs to be absorbed by another way because we have a contract.
So what you're saying is if we have to cut 5 or 7% to be structurally balanced, you're saying how do we do that in salaries and in benefits? Is that
for non-contract? Yes.
Or when you say non-contract, you're talking about really like the upper, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Supervisor Frentzen, in your statement of look at new positions we have created, I believe that's part of the early separation incentive, because each position that puts in for that, they will be evaluated against the new positions that are created to see if they're necessary, as well as that's part of the BOPR program as well as the comp and class. So I believe that is in the works per our direction months ago. Correct me if I'm wrong.
And the other thing is the potential, although I think we got a taste of it yesterday from the department heads that came in and presented, of reorganizations potentially from the early separation incentive. So that's maybe another opportunity.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Hang on, Joe. Hang on,
We need
please.
to stop the bleeding right now. You know, we may have to do some cuts that are excessive, but once we get us to that point that we are not bleeding, then we can plan on increasing revenues and, efficiencies, and little by little we can bring those back up to the point that they should be. But we're bleeding. Every month we're bleeding past July 1st, and our cuts have to be even further if we wait. IT, we're putting it in maintenance mode. We are preventing ourselves from having efficiencies in place by using the technology, by doing that. So a lot of the recommendations that are up there is not looking at, it's a reactionary budget cut. It's not a systematic approach to dealing with our budget deficit long term.
Shiva?
Thank you.
Okay. In about 2000, we had some budget problems. And at that time, I believe we had 3 bargaining units. And so what the board did is they said things like you were saying, which is health insurance costs are going up. The represented people, we can't make them pay more for health insurance without meeting and conferring and negotiating with them, so we'll just go after all the unrepresented people. I don't know how many bargaining units we have anymore. I don't think the HR director does. But under California, almost everybody has the right to form a union. Probably elected officials and the CAO are about it. Everybody else can form a union because it's too liberal in California. So if we're just going to go after the unrepresented people, there's going to be pushback. And the pushback is they'll organize. And then we'll have another bargaining unit to deal with. I admire greatly our unrepresented managers. We have a managers union. And the people that didn't ask, some people asked to be exempted and didn't want to join the managers union because they thought the Board of Supervisors would always play fair with them. And so if we're going to go after unrepresented managers like Laura Schwartz or whoever, that's off base. That's way off base, and it's going to be disruptive to the county of El Dorado. Our unrepresented they're the key people that run the place. And so to say we're going to go look at those positions to eliminate them, or look at those positions for salary cuts, frankly, the prior board cut the salaries of a lot of elected officials so that it was going to be the undersheriff and the assistant auditor were going to make lots more money than the auditor or the sheriff or the DA. I mean, it makes what you're saying isn't going to work. And I really appreciate how hard you're trying to make everybody work and how you're trying to find a way to balance the budget. I admire you for it. But to pick on the unrepresented managers, if the word gets out, and it may be out right now, they'll organize. They're going to organize. And we'll have another. And Jack Hughes of Liebert Cassidy is going to make more money because we'll have another group to negotiate with.